Hey guys, welcome back. I'm Omar Sevilla. Thanks for following me and being loyal and checking out what I have to share. Today we're doing the oil cooler install on a 2.0 TDI 2013 Volkswagen Passat. So that TDI engine's been pretty awesome, great on fuel mileage. I have had a couple little hiccups with it, but they're slowly being resolved as they come up. So one of the things that was happening is I was losing coolant. And it was about every oil change I would have to add a little bit of coolant to the coolant reservoir, and then eventually what happened was I started having to add coolant like once a week, and I was starting to smell a little coolant when I would park after a long drive, and then it came to a frequency of about once a day. So being an auto technician, I kind of like stretch them out because I don't want to work on them because, you know, limited on time and all that good stuff. So what I ended up doing was I went ahead and diagnosed the problem. I used my 5-step troubleshooting process, so I'll do a video on that. In fact, I have one. I'll do a shorter version. So the first thing I did was I have to verify the customer's concern, analyze the symptoms, isolate the problem, perform the repair, and then verify proper operation. Today we're performing the repair, so I've done 3 steps before we got to this part. So we could talk a little more about that in another video. But what I'd like to share, the problem we found was that this cooler here, the coolant passage failed where the plastic rib holds the gasket, and when it failed, it kind of blocked off the passage a little bit with some of this scale. So there's a TSB apparently that Volkswagen has where you get this scale in the cooling system and it plugs things up like the heater core and the radiator. So what I did while I had this cooler out was I went ahead and I flushed the block with a garden hose as best I could. We'll be draining the old oil out, putting new oil, new antifreeze, and we're gonna get this cooler, this new one, back in place. I found this one on Amazon for less than $100. The factory part's about $400 from the dealer. You could probably get it for a little better deal if you shopped around a little bit. And then to do this job, you're also going to need new bolts. The bolts on this component are torque to yield bolts, so they're one-time use. You can probably get away with reusing them, but I think the result would be a premature failure of the gaskets because you're not putting the proper tension on those gaskets and the oil cooler. So we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm going to scrape the block with a basic gasket scraper. Make sure we have a clean surface for our new gasket. When I'm done scraping it, I use a clean shop towel and I make sure to get any residual oil, water, and debris off my gasket surface. Next thing I'm going to do is verify that I have an oil filter in the new cooler and adapter housing, and then we're going to attach this coolant hose to the cooler before we bolt it down, get the clamp on, and then line the cooler up with the bolt holes and start the torque process. One of the things that I learned is I like to use a little bit of silicone spray and spray it on my hose and the hose nipple. This just helps me assemble my parts a little easier. So I'm going to try to line this guy up. We're roughly in position. I'm going to try to slide that water hose onto the nipple there. It should slip right on. All the way on, and then I have this tool here. Is a special hose clamp plier, and we're going to see if this is going to work for our setup here. So once I get my tool on, can line it up, slide it all the way on. I'm almost there. I'm gonna have to turn my tool the other direction to get it the rest of the way. Oh, slipped off again. These Volkswagen clamps are tricky. Some people like to just get the screw clamps. I'm gonna take my chances here and try to get this Volkswagen clamp to work. All right, once everything's lined up, we can remove our clamp tool. These are not easy to use, so if you have trouble, that's normal. All right, next step, I'm gonna make sure my gaskets are still in place, which it looks like they are. And I'm gonna get my bolts lined up, make sure I don't pinch any wires or anything else as I go back together. So these bolts have a unique head on them. It's called a triple square. So it's a 12-pointed inverted socket, so it just fits kind of like an Allen head, but it's called a triple square. So you can find these on Amazon. They're a little more pricey than a normal socket. I have a snap-on set that I bought years ago, but that's what it's called, a triple square. So that's what we'll be using. All right, now I have these all started. I'm gonna go ahead and run them down with the 1/4-inch air ratchet. Very light torque, and then I'm going to use a torque wrench. All right, I'm gonna just run these bolts down with my ratchet very lightly. So now we're going to torque these down to 14 Newton meters. It's 14 Newton meters plus a 1/4 turn. So we're going to tighten these down diagonally. It's pretty tight in here, and I'm using regular hand tools. Go in a diagonal pattern or X pattern. All right, and I like to just double check the first couple to make sure they still feel tight. All right. And now 1/4 turn. Quarter turn. All right, next step, we're going to put in this oil dipstick tube. I broke this one and had to JB weld it. I'm spraying a little silicone spray on the O-ring. They're about 80 bucks if it's not repairable. This one, I'm going to give it a shot before I spend another $80. Line that up. Got to get it in the hole. So it's got to go in the hole in the block. And then there's a hole that lines up with the oil cooler. And then there's a hole that lines up with the intake. You get everything lined up. There we go. O-ring just snapped right in. Got my hole at the intake is lined up. So now we'll just start snapping things in place. I'll tighten that bolt down once I have everything else lined up. Little push pin here.
Okay, dipsticks in.
All right, so here I have the intercooler. So this is a water style intercooler, so we actually have antifreeze that runs through here. So we have 5 water pipes. There's a small water pipe connection there. Then we have the turbo hose, and then we have our sensor. So I'm going to spray some silicone spray on all of these coolant hose fittings to help me get things together, and then I'm going to slide this into place. There are a couple of hoses that are tricky to put on, so I'm going to try and put those on before I actually install the bolts for this cooler, so that I don't have to rustle the clamps when it's in place. I think I got them all. This one. All right. So we'll kind of slide this into place.
It is a tight fit.
I could have taken that hose off, but I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible.
Slide this hose on here. There's a hose back here I can slide on. Alright, slide this hose on. Alright, so those guys should hold us in place for a minute while I get some of these clamps on. I know not everybody will like this style, but I'm going to use those hoses to help me hold this thing in place while I get the other clamps lined up. There we go. Kind of feel it slide into place. Get this bolt lined up. That bolt lined up. Oh, drop one. All right. Now we'll start running screws down. The extension key. Under here. Let's see right here. We have a couple of connections left on top here. One is the upper radiator hose, or the lower hose. So I'm going to slide this on and then try to get my hose clamp plier on there. So I'm going to spray a little silicone spray in the hose and on the outlet. And then I got this hose here that comes from the intercooler. Same thing. Get those clamps on. I'm going to come from this angle and rotate that clamp actually, and then try to get it from a different angle. There we go. Go. So kind of line it up as best we can. Release that clamp. Amazing tool. If you don't have this tool, you're really gonna struggle with these clamps. And then same thing on this cooler hose. Line that up. Try again. Just like that. All looks good. I gotta plug in my my sensor wire, my charged cooler sensor wire. Make sure you hear the click. And let's see if my dipstick fits in the repaired dipstick tube. Goes right in. All right, next steps. Got the oil cooler in, got the charge air cooler in, got all my hoses and wiring connected. The last couple steps, I need to make sure all my fluids are drained out. Then I'm gonna put new engine oil, new antifreeze, bleed the cooling system properly, make sure we get all the air bubbles out, and we're gonna put this car back into service.